Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Carlos, and this is Motivated Minds. I'm so glad you're here. If you are new to my channel, I would definitely appreciate you hitting that subscription button, hitting that notification bell. That would be super appreciated. This video that we're going to be talking about, actually, I'm sorry, it's not a video. I'm reacting to another article. And this article, man, it hit me hard, really hard today, as I was rereading it, and I collect, a bunch of articles. I have an archive of articles that I've read throughout the years, and this one actually I read in, I think it was around, I want to say, let me see here real quick, 2000, I want to say it was like 2016 or something like that. Actually, it was 2018. And it's an article written by Brené Brown, and many of you know who Brené Brown is, written some amazing books, and kind of the authority on shame. She's known for her interesting vulnerability that has been really helpful for me. But she has amazing articles on her website, so if you haven't gone to BrenéBrown.com, go there and look up her articles. There's some really good stuff there. The reason I like a lot of her articles is because she oftentimes interviews famous people that I have watched throughout the years, entertainers. And so she's able to kind of take you beyond the scenery with these entertainers, and it's really cool to see some of that stuff going on behind, like I said, behind the scenes. And today, we're going to do that. We are going to specifically be talking about courage and power from our pain. Can you believe that? That we can actually gain power and courage from our pain? So buckle up. Let's do this. Okay, so first of all, why? Why are we going to talk about pain and how we can find courage from that? Well, because pain is a reality. Right? There's nothing we can do about avoiding it. It's there. It's a part of our lives. Everybody has some pain somewhere in some area of their life. Everybody has some. So why, instead of trying to avoid it, why not use it? Use it for something, right? I don't know, something that guy I remember years ago. Some of you may remember, if you're as old as I am, there was a tennis player. His name was John McEnroe. And I love watching him and he was kind of famous to watch because of his anger his anger, his tantrums, that he would have on the tennis court. But every time he had a tantrum, he would end up playing better. That was what was so crazy about John McEnroe, is he would use this anger that would come up in him, or frustration, whatever it was. He would use it for his advantage. Instead of it breaking him down, it built him up, which is fascinating. And I don't know that really happens as much, in other areas of our life. But he was able to basically, he was able to steer that anger in the right area. That energy, he placed it to help him focus even more on executing his tennis game. That's what he did. Interesting, isn't it? I just had this thought. If I used my anger when it was triggered to help me focus on executing better, and you know what I mean by that, right? It's kind of like in basketball. The team that usually executes the best is the team that wins. Sometimes the team isn't even as talented, but if they execute better, they tend to win the game. It's all about execution. You see that a lot in football. What do they call it? On any given Sunday, right? And that's because, really, on any given Sunday, a football team can win. You never know. There's a good possibility that the team there too that executes better is going to win. And so this pain that we're going to read about today, with this person, they have been able to channel their pain to help them build courage and power in their life. And you've seen this, you're going to see this incredible success story that they have become. So without further ado, let's take a look at this article. Okay, so here we are. Brené Brown, and of course this interview here is with Viola Davis. Here she is, the beautiful and amazing Viola Davis. You may know her from some of her films. The Help, that's where I first saw her, in The Help. How to Get Away with Murder. And Fences, of course, Fences. That's a really powerful film. And this is something I didn't know. Check this out. She's the first black actor to win the Triple Crown of acting. I had no idea. I didn't know Viola won the Emmy, the Tony, and the Oscar. Isn't that crazy? And then I did know this. In 2017, she was listed by Time Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Let me just stop right there for a second. Some of you may think, when you hear that, I think a lot of us just think, well, of course she's an influence. I mean, look at her. She's such a powerful voice. She's this famous actress. I don't think that when it's all said and done, that's what she's going to be most influential for. If I could speak to Viola, I would say, Viola, I think that you have expanded your territory of influence because of this work that you've done, because of your personal work, because of the giants that you've chosen to face in your life, because that, I think, has by far spoken so much more inspiration to people to overcome their giants. And we're going to read how Viola has overcome her giants in this article. Brené Brown talks with her in this book called Braving the Wilderness, The Quest for True Belonging and the Courage to Stand Alone. If you haven't gone out and bought this book, get it now, download it, do whatever you have to get it, to start reading it. It's a powerful read, and it's about harnessing our pain. Instead of running from our pain our whole life, which most of us do, we can actually harness that pain and channel it in the right direction, okay? All right, so let's get into this article. So Viola's story, she says, it exemplifies the power of courage in the face of pain, vulnerability in the face of fear, and how living and loving close up leads to true belonging. True belonging is really powerful, by the way. When we talk about that, in fact, let's just go down here because she talks a little bit more about it. Here's the beginning. Here's the excerpt from the book. When I asked Viola to tell me about the beginning of her journey into true belonging, this is what she said to me. I've spent the first 3 years of my life feeling like a square peg in a round hole. Okay, let's talk about belonging for a second. Belonging is not just something we experience by being around somebody. Belonging is something we experience when we have this deep and meaningful connection with that person sitting across from us. And that true belonging is usually formed very early in our childhood. And so this is why Viola talks about maybe not experiencing that belonging throughout her whole life until she began to do her work. And this is what she says. I lived in an Irish Catholic area of Rhode Island. Oh, wow. White girls with long blonde hair. Yeah, okay. Can you imagine Viola growing up, on Rhode Island with white girls and long blonde hair? She says, I was a kinky-haired girl with dark skin who totally spoke differently. I wasn't pretty. I carried the trauma of growing up in abject poverty. I was the daughter of a violent alcoholic. Are you kidding me? I was a bedwetter until I was 12 or 13. I smelled. Teachers complained about the smell and sent me to the nurse's office. I was wrong. This was my beginning. Wow. Again, it's been a while since I've really dug into this. As I just scanned over it today to remind me of a little bit of her story, this is what really stood out to me. This was my beginning. She's acknowledging that was how she started. She started out with this deficit. This traumatic deficit. I mean, can you relate to this a little bit? Some of you who might have begun this way in some way. I mean, the trauma of growing up in abject poverty, they lived most likely in constant survival mode. And then she was also, her dad was an alcoholic. He was not only an alcoholic, but a violent alcoholic. So when she says trauma, she means real trauma. Not just, fear, but deep, deep trauma. And then she says, I was a bedwetter. Can you imagine how embarrassing and humiliating that must have been for her to smell and for teachers to actually complain about it and send her to the nurse's office. I mean, my heart just breaks when I think about that. I actually remember I had a friend growing up who was a bedwetter, and he struggled with that. So I can't imagine up until 12 or 13, and the humiliation again of having someone else call that out. Wow. And that's why she says, I was wrong. And so her beginning was that she was wrong. This is what she's saying. Let's keep reading. My language for belonging was about survival. Can I take a hot shower? Is there going to be any food today? Will my dad kill my mom? Will there be rats in the house? Wow. Constant survival. She says, I had no tools. I carried this trauma. I carried this fear. I carried this anxiety and the inability to speak up for myself into my adult life. See, all of it was deeply rooted in shame. Do you get this right here? This is one of the biggest issues that we have, is carrying this shame narrative into our adult life, because that shame narrative doesn't allow us to see ourselves through this mirror. Instead, it's kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen circus mirrors where you look into the mirror and you look just all weird. Well, that's the kind of mirror that you see yourself in when you grow up with a life that's been rooted in shame. And Viola is saying that. So she must have seen herself kind of like that circus mirror reflection of herself. And then she says, I spent all of my energy hiding and keeping the brutality of my life a secret. Oh, that must have been a lot of energy to do that. I carried this dysfunction with me into my adult life. This is what I mean. You can't outrun it. You can try and outrun this dysfunction, but it's too fast. It will always catch up to you. And then she says, then I asked her, Brené says, then I asked her to tell me about taking her first steps into her wilderness. And Viola said, you know what? I knew I was afraid of confrontation. That I knew. But it wasn't until I started doing therapy that I realized why the anxiety made speaking up almost impossible. Do you hear what she's saying? She's saying that part of that dysfunction that she brought into her adult life was that she couldn't speak up for herself. It was almost impossible to speak up for herself. And then she says, I had an experience where I should have confronted someone who was doing something horrible to me. And then what I realized was, in that moment, I flashed back to my 14-year-old self. Wow. And this is what she remembers. I was holding my baby sister, and my father was stabbing my mother in the neck with a pencil. Are you kidding me? I shouted, stop it. Give me that pencil, Dad. And he did it. Wow. My father, he stopped and he handed me the pencil. I was a child who was forced to confront an adult. I had to take the power position before I should have needed to, and before I was ready. I paid for it in fear. Do you see that? I was a child of an alcoholic, and so I do relate to Viola's story here. But even if you have a parent who struggles with depression, a parent who struggles with one mental illness, a parent who struggles with addiction, you most likely, if your other parent wasn't able to come in and support in ways that was needed, you mostly were forced into confronting that parent. You were probably in a place where you had to take the power position, like Brené says here, like Viola says. You most likely had to take the power position before you should have needed to, or before you were ready. You shouldn't have had to do that. You shouldn't have had to play that role. And a lot of times with a parent, a child of an alcoholic, a lot of times we become caretakers, don't we? We start to parent our parent. We become the parent. And that has massive, massive effects. If we aren't rescued out of that by somebody soon enough, We carry that kind of stuff into our adult life, into our marriage, into our family. So let's keep going. Viola is someone who's made the transition from fear of the wilderness to braving the wilderness to becoming the wilderness. That's our goal, to become the wilderness. And I wanted to know how that happened. So Viola says, you know what, at 38, things changed. I didn't jump out of bed one morning and everything was perfect. I've always known I was a strong woman, but I wanted this fast food joy, this quick, this easy joy. I wanted these more tools, more tricks. I also could still fall back into this broken narrative. Remember, this is that wounded, deep inner child narrative that we take into our adult life. She says, I can fall back into this narrative that says I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not good enough. Do you see that? That's that wounded narrative that we take into our adult life. And it's kind of like a broken script, a dysfunctional script that we were given, we were handed as a child, and it's like, okay, now go live this script out. And that's what Viola is doing right here. She's living that script out whenever she buys into those false beliefs that I'm not enough, that I'm not pretty enough, that I'm not thin enough, that I'm not good enough. And then she says, one day my therapist asked me a pivotal question. Viola, what if nothing ever changes? What if your looks never change? What if your weight never changes? What if your success never changes? Would you be okay? I've often asked my own clients this kind of question. For the first time, Viola says, I thought, you know what? Yes, I would. I really, really would. Wow, I love that. This is when I realized that the past was not going to define me. Yes. This is when I realized that the past, do you realize that? You do not have to be at the mercy of your past failures or your past pain, that past dysfunctional family stuff. You don't have to be at the mercy of it. It doesn't have to control your life. And Viola was at a point where she realized, I am not going to allow the past to define me. And by doing that, she says, I also got married to an amazing man who really saw me. He was my gift for working so hard on myself. He was kind, and I was finally vulnerable and open to that. Do you realize what she's saying here? Is that the work that she did on herself, the way that she cared for herself, brought some healing into her life that allowed her then to begin to see people differently as well. See, she began to realize she was worthy enough to be loved, to be cared for, to be cherished. And that's the person that she picked. Isn't that powerful? When we get healthy, we usually end up kind of gravitating towards healthier people who can meet our deeper needs, our deepest needs, because we are beginning to feel loved and accepted and worthy. That's really powerful. And so then Brené says, I asked her, you know what, Viola, when you belong to yourself, there's always going to be criticism. What's your experience with that? And Viola replied, acting culture can be brutal. The notes can simply say, you're not attractive enough, you're too old, you're too dark-skinned, you're not skinny enough. They actually tell you to develop a thick skin so things don't get to you. What they don't tell you is that your thick skin will keep everything from getting out. Things like love and intimacy and vulnerability. I never thought of that. Isn't that true? Like having that thick skin, not allowing anything to get to you. It also keeps other things from getting out as well, like love and intimacy and vulnerability. And then she says, I don't want that. You see, thick skin doesn't work anymore for me, she says. I want to be transparent. I want to be translucent. Yes. And for that to work, I won't own other people's shortcomings. I won't own their criticisms. I'm done with that, she says. I won't put what you say about me on my load. That is so powerful. Wow. I won't put what you say about me on my load. Woo, man. This is inspiring me right now. I am loving what Viola has to say. She says, you know what? Brené says, I'm not sure there's a more poignant example of someone who was able to recognize her pain, own her story, write a new ending. Remember, she's writing a new script that includes transforming her pain into compassion for others. And she says this, you know what? I held my dad's hand as he actually died. He died of pancreatic cancer. We had healed our relationship. We loved each other very much. And when my sister and I sat with him, we learned something. We learned that he hated his work his entire life. Isn't that interesting? They never knew that. Their father didn't have the tools to be vulnerable. So for decades, he groomed horses at a racetrack. We never knew he hated it. He also had a second grade education. He also worked as a janitor. We never knew that's how he felt. We never knew it. It was devastating for us to think about the pain that he endured his entire life. Wow. But so cool that she was able to heal in her relationship with her father, though, right? I mean, that to me is, I wish I was able to do that. My dad died younger, when I was much younger, so I wasn't able to speak to him when I was a more healed person. But you know what's powerful about that? And I think this goes back to our inner child. I've had dreams about meeting my dad in my more healed state and having conversations with him. Isn't that amazing? I think that's how much I wanted to connect with him. There's an unspoken message that the only stories worth telling are the stories that end up in history books. Viola says that is not true. See, every story matters. My father's story matters. I have a brother who overdosed on heroin when he was in his mid-30s, and I tell his story all the time because his story matters. We are all worthy of telling our stories and having them heard. We all need to be seen and honored in the same way that we all need to breathe. So Brené says, Viola is in the wilderness. And she said, I asked her if true belonging took the shape of practice for her. Like, what did that look like for you? And she said, you know what, today I live by a few simple rules. Let's hear these rules. Number 1, I'm doing the best I can. Yes, I'm doing the best I can. Let's stop beating the crap out of ourselves today. Can we acknowledge that we're doing the best we can? You know, we don't like to acknowledge that positive column. We tend to beat ourselves up, don't we? A lot. And with what Viola came through, she really had to fill up that other column, that column of what I can do. Because she was probably grew up a lot focused on that negative column of what I can't do. And then number 2, she says, I will allow myself to be seen. And you know what's interesting about that? She's not talking about this. Everybody could see this. What she's talking about, I will allow myself to be my authentic person, and I will be good with it. I will allow people to see what's happening in here, and I will be good. And then she says, number 3, I apply the advice of an acting coach that an acting coach gave me to all aspects of my life. Go further. Don't be afraid. Put it all out there, and don't leave anything on the floor. That is my word. That's my phrase for today, just for today. Go further. Don't be afraid. Put it all out there, and don't leave anything on the floor. Number 4, I will not be a mystery to my daughter. Oh, that really gets me. That just hit something in me. Wow, she will know me, and I will share my stories with her. The stories of failure, the stories of shame, and the stories of accomplishment. That's so awesome, Viola. She will know she's not alone in that wilderness. Wow. Well, if you're a parent, maybe you need to learn a little something from Viola here. And lastly, she says, "This is who I am. This is where I'm from. This is my mess. This is what it means to belong to myself." Wow. Well, how was that? How was that? I mean, did you connect with that in some way? I mean, Viola's story to me, again, is just, it's such a powerful story of just what the title says. It's a powerful story of of getting courage and power from our pain. I mean, I am just so blown away by her story. I'm so grateful that we can go behind the scenes, pull that curtain back a little bit of Viola's life and get a deeper sense of what's happened back there. It's inspiring to me. It really is. I mean, just reading that article, reading more about Viola's story, it really does make me want to take greater ownership of my pain today. Doesn't it do that for you? I hope it does that for you. Well, the last thing I want to share with you before we finish up today is an interesting quote from somebody, a person that you probably would never think this came from. Years ago, I grew up with an incredible action movie star named Bruce Lee. Some of you know who Bruce Lee is. I think probably most of you do. But what a lot of you don't realize is that he was a really deep thinker and philosopher. I think he was a philosophy major, actually, in college. And I remember watching him on this talk show when he was being interviewed. And he said something that has stuck with me forever. And I want to leave this for you as a gift. I want you to take this, internalize it, meditate on it, think about it, just for today, and see how this might help. So here it is. Be water, my friend. Empty your mind. Be formless. Be shapeless, like water. You see, you put water into a teacup, it becomes the teacup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.